Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you are in St. Lucia or in the diaspora, tonight is a very special night. And I must warn you that if I become emotional, do forgive me because that is in my nature. The person is special, and I'm sure you will all agree. She served in the public service for over 30 years. She started as a secretary. Would you believe it? In those days, that's what it was. She's been married for 30 years, and it's going on. She started in the public service, as I said, as a secretary. Her last post at the ministry was at the Ministry of Infrastructure as the permanent secretary. She was also in the position of the executive director of the Caribbean Electric Utility Services, CARELECT as we call it, and is now currently the chief executive officer of the National Utilities Regulatory Commission, NURC. She's had 3 children. And I wouldn't go too deep now because I don't want to tell you who she is until the end. My guests have been exposed to international media, more so these days, and I'm so happy that she's here with us. It's a privilege. She was awarded Lady of Grace, HTS Person of the Year 2018, also Christian A Cappella Music Awards, and her son Brant received the 219 Ethical Courage Award. In fact, when I saw him even now, I did cry. So ladies and gentlemen of St. Lucia and the diaspora, I introduce to you my guest tonight, Mrs. Allison Jean. Good evening, Allison.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me.
I hope I haven't gone too deep and try to project you. And obviously, I said you had 3 children, but now 2 because of the tragic incident of both of them. Yeah. Allison, I want to start with the first, in the first instance. You were in the public service for over 30 odd years. As a secretary, you began, as I mentioned. There have been many changes, and the changes we have seen, or I have seen, deals with, say, for example, politicians not recognizing the importance of the people that work there with the experience, with the knowledge. They think they have the knowledge. How is that? How do you think now that we have to go back and let the professionals advise instead of ministers advising professionals? What do you think?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dennis, for having me tonight.
Yes.
I'm very happy to be able to share my experience with St. Lucia. And like you said, I've been in the public service for 30 years, so my career transcends administrations. I've worked with both administrations. I left the public service as a permanent secretary, and I could tell you, in order for politicians or the policy directorate to be able to accept the advice of technocrats within the service, they must have the humility to do so. They need to recognize that there are persons who study the public service, who understand the rules and regulations of the public service, and they need to recognize that they should be subject to advice. Actually, in your job description as a permanent secretary, one of the major roles that you play is to advise your minister. And so if there isn't that humility and people come into the public service as ministers and believe that they know it all, then we will have a complete disaster. So I think the main thing is to have the humility. I can tell you too that I've worked with different ministers, and there are a couple that I could say came with that humility and that mindset. And it was a pleasure working with them. But there are others who want to advise you, and that advice is not necessarily the correct advice. Because the public service, a lot of people believe that they could run the public service as any other business. That is not so. The public service, by its very nature, is for the people. Yeah? So there are rules, there are regulations, there are laws that guide the way things are done in the public service. And what I tell staff, what I tell my colleagues, is everything you do in the public service must come from some authority. That authority would either be a law, it would either be a policy, it would either be a rule, it would be some guideline, but there must be some authority. So Allison Jean doesn't wake up in the morning and just make a decision just for decision's sake without the requisite authority. So when we see things happening differently, I always question where the authority came from for such decisions to be made.
But you know, what I find strange, Allison, is that in the past, when we were still in the time of my father, real colonial mindset, so to speak, and sometimes I still think we're still in that, the public service was run differently.
Absolutely.
But today, when we now are in control, when you should have more respect for your professionals, we are not seeing that. You know, so what makes you? I agree with you on the humility, but what makes a minister think, probably a minister for the first time, you know, think that he has all the knowledge, and the person who has been doing that for probably 15, 20 years don't have that knowledge or don't have as much knowledge as he has, who just began.
Right. Now, people could come and do whatever they want. So a minister can come green and make certain demands or give certain instructions. I think it all goes back to the public officer with the knowledge to be able to guide that minister. What I've done in the past, I usually speak very candidly to my minister. If there's one thing I do, we speak candidly. I am loyal to the public service, to the people of St. Lucia, and therefore I cannot hide and tell a minister what he or she wants to hear. I will tell you the truth. Now, if you accept the truth that I'm telling you, and remember I said that truth comes with the authority. So I would say the Procurement and Store Rules says that, the Finance Act says that, the Constitution says that. I cite the particular law which says what it's supposed to be done. If you still go against, then at one point I put my advice in writing. Or if it is something that I disagree with, I put it in writing. That's how we were taught. Now, you spoke about the colonial days. I'm happy that I started in the public service in 1985, during the time of deceased G.O.S.L. And there's a lady that I started with, Margaret Rose Gustav. I think she's still alive. And I owe it to these people who taught me well. So that is what I use in order to get by in the public service. To tell you the truth based on whatever source of authority that I use. So what I believe right now might be lacking is not only the ministers of government doing the reverse and advising, but also the professionals in the public service need to be strong and courageous enough and know the sources of authority in order for them to do what is right.
Because the reason why I'm saying this is because when I looked at the public service in the past, when you began, it didn't matter who got into power.
At all.
You were a public servant, and you served the public.
That's correct.
Consequently, it didn't matter who came in, whether you had you supported a party inside. You don't show it. That's what it was all about.
That's right.
You work. That is your job.
That is right.
Your job is not a party job.
That's correct.
The job is to serve the country, the people.
Well, Dennis, I could tell you I have told successive ministers on their first day in office when I meet them, "Good morning, Minister. Good afternoon, Minister. I am here to serve the people of St. Lucia, not a political party." Yeah?
Yes.
So regardless of which party that minister is a part of, I do not serve the party. I recalled in my early days, after when I came back from university, a minister came to me and said that I'd called someone for a job. We had vacancies, and I had a file of persons who had applied, so I called each person to find out whether they were still interested because their application was dated, maybe about beyond 6 months. So I called to find out whether they were still unemployed and wanted the job. One of the persons that I called seemed to have been aligned closely to a political party. So the minister came to me all, hot-headed and said that I had called this person. You call this person who was part of a political party, or whose father is strong in a political party. I said to him, "Sir," I said, "Minister, here is the person's application. He didn't put a symbol on it." So I don't know where he falls. I was simply calling every single person, and perhaps if he had put a symbol on his application, I would not have called him. But there was no symbol, so I don't know where he falls. But respectfully, I had to let him know that my job does not entail giving supporters jobs versus non-supporters and things like that. I've never practiced that.
But Allison, you said something that, and I hope everybody listened to that, because it is relevant, that you have served both parties as a permanent secretary. I remember you in the infrastructure at the time, and education. And, it didn't matter who was there. There was the other party before you were still there. It didn't matter, So I remember, too, that Minister, at the time, Minister Pierre was in the infrastructure. You were around, you know what I mean? Then Stevenson King, you worked with him.
Right.
So that was what it should have been all about. And you gave your best.
I give my best 24/7. My loyalty is to the people of St. Lucia. And Dennis, upon reflection, sometimes you just work and you don't even think of what you're doing. But when I reflect on my career in the public service, my joy comes from serving people. So, especially in infrastructure, I had a passion for infrastructure when I saw that what we did changed lives.
Correct.
So when we opened the Dubonnet Bridge, when we were doing the Dubonnet Bridge, to have seen people having to walk on a coconut plank across a river to get from one side to the other, and then to now construct a Dubonnet Bridge, what it meant to these people was really heartening to me. When a child can say, "I'm happy for the bridge because I can now run to the ice cream truck," or the lady can say, "Apweza Masai Western Leoswe," or when a man can say he can now go to the health center for his diabetes, for his insulin shot.
Yeah.
These things change people's lives, and I'm happy to be associated with anything that reaches out to the poor, to the marginalized, and to vulnerable people.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I do want to come into something, because we're going for our first break. And to come into the second break, because you say that people's lives matter.
That's right.
And therefore, I then want to now move into what one would term, and many people know, and I believe in it very strongly, Black Lives Matter. So let's hold on there, and we'll be back. Welcome back, St. Lucia, and those in the diaspora. As you know, I gave my guest such a long introduction because she deserves it. And we now are going to touch on something that I think is relevant today, more so in St. Lucia too, because what happens overseas affects us one way or the other, and that is Black Lives Matter. Allison, I know you've given so much passion to that now. In fact, I saw you in the boulevard, and I listened. But you spoke there with a passion that, you know, even now as I'm saying it, things are going through me because I was shaken. Mm-hmm. Why suddenly we have come to that? To make sure that the world understands that Black Lives Matter.
Well, as you know, my son was killed by a Dallas police officer.
Yes, yes.
A white Dallas
Yes.
police officer,
Yes.
right in the comfort of his apartment. And this was a grave injustice that was done to him. Now, prior to his death, he and I always spoke about the different, the police brutality and white supremacy that was happening in the United States. We spoke about some of the experiences he had with white people. Now, mind you, Botham was a child who interacted with everybody. White, black, Chinese,
Yes,
Latino,
yes, yes.
Indians, everybody. He brought a group of students from Harding University to St. Lucia. They were all white. He was the only black one among them. But they came every year. Sometimes they came twice a year. Botham was just a leader in his own skin. And so for him to have been gunned down in his own apartment, an apartment he particularly paid attention to ensure that he was secure, it came to me that there are some white privileged people who believe that black people do not matter. That you can just shoot down a black person and then it's okay. I could also tell you, Dennis, after Botham was killed, when I first landed in Dallas, the evening after, in fact, it was the Saturday when I spoke to a couple of people, and especially one of the Texas Rangers, I realized that he didn't think that Botham's life really mattered. He felt that it was just a simple mistake. So I said, no, Allison, you need to fight for your child. I put on a lioness cloak and I was ready to secure my cub. So I started speaking out to the district attorney, to the police chief, to senators, and to anybody who came before me to let them know that this was no ordinary child. This was a special child, and every parent would regard their child as special. And I give no parent wrong for saying so, regardless of who that child was. So my special child would not just go down, gunned down like an animal on the street.
But Alison, not cutting you short. You said you put on that, you became a lioness in that sense of the word. Mm-hmm. But when I look at your husband, and I'll tell you that, I see one of the most gentle guys. Mm-hmm. And I saw him next to you at times. And it is as though that you were in two different worlds. because you were like, as you say, the lioness, and he was like the gentle lamb.
The lamb, that's right.
I mean that in all sincerity.
Yeah, well,
Even
people
as I say
compliment
that-
each couple.
Even as I say that, I cry.
Yeah, couples compliment each other, and knowing the kind of person he is, my husband is this
Yes.
very passive, you know, calm, pious
Yes, yes.
person. Doesn't want to ruffle any feathers.
Yes.
He doesn't want to, you know. But that was not the time for that.
No, it wasn't. You were right, actually.
It was the time to fight. And I believe, Dennis, that through our fight, now mind you, he may not be in the forefront
Yes.
fighting, but he certainly fuels me from the back. So I fought, and I could tell you I feel that my fight did not go in vain.
No, it didn't.
Because I believe it may be unprecedented that a case went through so quickly. So Botham was killed in September 2018,
Correct.
and by 2019, September, we had a conviction.
Conviction, yeah.
Yeah? So we need to know how we could stand up, that we have the power to stand up when it is called for.
But Allison, do you think too that over the years, because I've had relatives living in the States, and you remember Kalai Marcial, he died I think about a month ago with the coronavirus, and that blacks were really taken for granted,
That's right.
especially West Indian blacks.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first time they realized that a black West Indian is not going to take that one.
Exactly.
And they were almost lost to see that fight. And that is what we're talking about, where
Well,
black lives now became so important.
Dennis, I met a number of St. Lucians overseas, in New York, in Dallas, in Miami. A couple of them said to me, especially in New York, "Oh, nothing is going to come out of this."
Ah, yes.
And let me tell you, nothing hurt me more when they told me so. "Oh, you're fighting a losing battle. Nothing is going to come out of this." That propelled me to fight even harder. Okay? And the thing about it, you don't fight and, throw yourself down on the ground and you do things, but you have to be strategic. And that's what I do. So I know who I was dealing with, and I knew how to deal with these people. But what I am very heartened about is I believe that we had a very good prosecuting team. The district attorney's office was very invested in that case. And when I met with them, imagine I met with the district attorney on a Sunday afternoon. And you would swear it was a working day because all staff were there present.
Yes.
A conference room with staff, and the then district attorney, Faith Johnson, told me, "Mama, look at me in my eyes, and I could tell you I'm going to fight for your son."
Good.
And I said, "Thank you." And from then, she and her team, and then she was succeeded by John Crusoe, DA John Crusoe, and they fought, and I'm really heartened. Also, I had my 3 civil attorneys who too stood by my side. And I must say, Dennis, that my family had tremendous support.
Yes.
Everywhere we went. St. Lucia, in Dallas, in New York, all over.
I was just going to say that the point, the thing here was, for the first time, a young black West Indian killed, and this was all over the world.
Went worldwide.
Everybody
All the way to
wanted
Australia.
to know. I'm telling you,
Yes.
I followed it, and everywhere for the first time, and then I knew at least there was a good God
Well,
finally.
Oh, well, I knew that long before.
No.
I knew how good God was long
No,
before.
because my life in England as a black, when I first went there, people don't know the suffering that you
Exactly.
go through.
Yeah.
They see you today, but they don't know what you've been through. And I can understand what both of them went through. At least I'm here, but unfortunately, and he's not. But that is what has happened to many.
Many.
And I hate to say it that way. Christ died on the cross for our sins. So at least we could be set free. I think I look at both of them today, and I say that he went as a young man, killed indiscriminately, but he opened the way for all blacks now
That's true.
in America.
That's
It didn't
true.
matter whether it was the West Indian, even the normal black from America.
Right.
It's given them strength.
That's correct. And that's what Botham wanted to do. Sometimes I look back and I'm saying Botham is still there.
Yes.
Because Botham
He is.
always spoke about making the world a better place. And he always spoke about the marginalized. Mommy, I want to help the people. He had a passion for G.O.S.L. I don't know what about G.O.S.L. that he really wanted to reach out to. So he met little old ladies in G.O.S.L., brought their birthday cake, went to sing happy birthday to them. He had that. And up to now, in his death, I am seeing that he has opened a way for many other black people to live a little better in the United States.
He's opened a way out of no way.
He's opened a way
And
out.
that is
That's
what
correct.
I see and think about when I think of the whole tragedy. That things were still closed to an extent. And we know that later on what happened,
Yeah.
which even exploded this thing out of all proportion to the extent that it didn't matter what country you were
Right.
in. Both of them. And I Can't Breathe, which is our
Judge.
signature tune these days, became well known. But the point, what I want to mention to you too, is that how do you feel now that, or to ask, what do you feel now in the sense that, your middle son, was taken
For my
away.
last son. Oh, my middle son. Both of them, yes.
Yeah, middle son, because you have your daughter and then your last son.
Yes.
And what I always wanted to ask you, how did you feel in court when your last son said, now I'm thinking, I sat there that night and tears came into my eyes because I sat and I asked the question, is he serious? And you know what I thought at the time? How you and your husband felt in the courtroom. Did you all know that he was going to?
We had no idea what he was going to say. In fact, when he walked up, I remember him fixing his glasses.
Yes.
So I turned to my husband and I said, Saikaidila. And I'm saying, what did he want to say? But Dennis, what Brand did is a reflection of who we are.
Exactly.
It's a reflection of both of them.
Yes.
And I felt that when Brand went there, it was the Holy Spirit that filled that room. And Brand did what he lived, what he knew to do.
Would have done.
That is exactly what, but he said so.
Yes.
This is what Botham would have done. And I kept saying, even before Brand did that, that had Amber Geiger given Botham 60 seconds, he would have been alive today.
Correct.
Because Botham would have been able to pacify Amber Geiger.
Exactly.
That was the kind of child Botham was. So what Brand did was a true reflection of the Christian beliefs that he has grown up in,
Yes.
as well as what Botham would have done and what God has asked him to do. So it's just a pity that a lot of people don't see it that way. a lot of people think that we as blacks are just continuing to be subservient by running and giving and forgiving too quickly.
Not at all.
But Brand did
Yes.
what he had to do.
What, as I said, I sat there at night, and at first I was shocked, but later I immediately thought, but if we are a Christian, faith, we practice the Christian faith. This is what Christianity is. Because if you remember, Christ said, "He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone," and no one could cast. We are going to take the second break, and we're going to come back to the last break, because, Allison, I want to ask you, what we have seen in America, is it also here in St. Lucia? Because when you talk about Black Lives Matter, that, for me, is a passionate thing, because we are seeing some of that. I will come back to that. Welcome back to our last segment. And in studio with me, I have Mrs. Allison Jean. And as you know, her middle son, Botham, well loved by everyone, whether in America, whether in St. Lucia, was tragically killed. He has become a household name now all over the world. And, and it is brought to light problems that when we don't have well-trained policemen, or policemen that are racist, or policemen that believes that they have this power, and this power now can be used or abused. So, Allison, here is the question: what do you? Because when you were speaking about Black Lives Matter, you were saying, yes, the same thing. We've had young ones here, and up to now, nothing has been done.
Well, see, what I went through with Botham's death really jolted me into recognizing that when a family loses a loved one, especially to police brutality, that it removes, it destroys your entire being, your family, and everything. And I'm not sure that police officers or the powers that be really recognize the tremendous loss that one experiences over that. But more than the police brutality, when one is gunned down, taken senselessly, the void that is created by the family. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter in the United States and the other parts of the world, St. Lucia must recognize too that there are important lives here who matter. So when there is a case, it should not just be swept under the carpet. And I am one who have been speaking out over the death of Arnold Joseph in particular, who was gunned down on Chaussee Road, and we know that it was done by police officers. Now, I have no problem if a police officer has used his firearm to shoot someone who is lawless, who has been involved in a criminal act or something like that. I would feel more comforted if there is a trial that turns out that the police officer was justified. The police officer's actions were just justified. But you cannot tell me a child is gunned down since last year, in May of last year. We're now in July of the following year. And there cannot even be a coroner's inquest or something to say that he had a gun, he did this. You're not hearing any evidence. You're not hearing anything about that case. And then you have a mother who is dying over the death of her son. I mean, that is not That is
Unacceptable.
unacceptable. Then you have Kimberly Williams de Leon. I worked with her at the Ministry of Education.
Yes, yeah.
Pretty girl. When I meet her in the lift or somewhere, I would call her nice eyes.
Wow.
Right? Beautiful hair, beautiful eyes, pleasant girl, hard worker, gunned down in her home. You're not hearing anything about it. So I believe the same way we are looking to the United States and letting them know that Black Lives Matter, we must look to our authorities here and let them know that it's unacceptable for persons to be killed here and nothing happens. We're not hearing anything about it. I cannot say all lives matter in the United States because blacks are the ones who are really marginalized. But for us in St. Lucia, we have to ensure that every act that is committed comes out, that there is some inquest, that there is some inquiry, that there is some trial that reveals right or wrong. So we should not just be passive. Another thing too, Dennis, one of the Calypsonians says, nothing is we business until it reach crisis. We need to stop this. Everything should be our business before it reaches crisis. So when somebody like this young girl who has gone down in Pigeon Point, I am looking to see what is going to come out of that case. To the 2 young men in Sarot, what is going on? The authorities must look into these killings and really empathize with the families so that they can put in some extra pressure in order to resolve these or to solve these cases. The chief prosecutor in Dallas, the chief prosecutor for the Amber Geiger case, said to me, Mrs. Jean, he was the one who blew up Bofum's picture and put it in a frame. And he said, I kept this photo in my office every day to remind me that I have to fight for Bofum. That shows you the passion that he did his job with. He wanted to fight for that his client. Is that happening here in St. Lucia? We're certainly not feeling it. I'm not saying the police officers are not doing it, but we certainly must feel it.
But Allison, don't you think, and that's how I think that we got rid of the British or the French, who were the colonials. And all we did, instead of making things better, we just jump into their shoes. And we have a sort of colonialism because we've been told it has a conscience. And what we are seeing is that the poor gets poorer. Those who are well-to-do seem to get even better off. And consequently, we can now understand how colonialism worked. And all we did, instead of saying, let us throw that to one side and do something that is worthwhile for all, what we are doing, in a sense, or what they have done in a sense, is let the British go, the so-called whites, and all we have done is to jump into their
same pattern
that is going on. And this is what you're seeing in England. You go to the prisons, the majority are blacks. Mm-hmm. America is black, and why?
But you see, Dennis, to me, the question is, do we support our own?
Exactly.
And, when you look around your community and you see persons who have been successful in whatever their field of endeavor, do we highlight these successes? We don't do that.
You're quite right. But when somebody from overseas, we highlight
it was here we bowed down. and we took some of that from our parents, eh?
Exactly.
Because when you had the nice teacup and saucers
Yes.
stuck away in the cabinet, it's only when étranger come, that's when you put it out. So we were socialized that way. But as we grow on,
Yes.
what we need to do is celebrate our successes, celebrate who we are, celebrate the people. I saw on a show this morning 2 young men who were speaking about robotics, and I was so happy to see these young people. It really gave me a hope for the future. But when we marginalize our own people, put them down. So some people may see me and say, who Allison thinks she is? The girl that came from Masha. I was born in Masha Boulevard. But I never forget my roots.
Never.
It does not mean that because you come from Masha, that you have to just remain with the Masha mentality.
Exactly.
I remember where I came from,
You must.
but I must grow, I must develop.
Exactly.
So I think, Dennis, what we need to be doing, and Adrian Auger said something which I really support and I agree with. Our economic strategy has not worked because we believe that our support must go to the haves.
Correct.
So it must go to the hotels, it must go to the big businesses and the manufacturers and so on. But our support, I believe, needs to go to the middle class. The middle class can patronize the restaurant and the hotels. The middle class, on the other hand, can hire the gardener, the maid, the car washer, whoever else. So both levels, the top and the bottom class, can all benefit from the middle. But if you do it in the reverse, you support, you give the social support to the bottom class, they don't go and help the middle class. They still don't go to the hotels and the restaurants and these other things. So our economic strategy at a national level, our economic policies must seek to permeate through the various sectors and through the entire economy in order for us to work.
Yeah, it has
so
to go
we cannot just have the whole colonial mindset.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I still don't understand the statement of colonialism having a conscience.
Well, I've never understood it.
I don't understand it. I think it's unfortunate. Sometimes there's a slip of the tongue. I just want to say it as that.
Yes.
I think what we have to do is celebrate our blackness, celebrate our success. And I'll tell you, Dennis, I have hope that black people are coming out. If you notice, more black ladies rock their natural black hair.
Yes, yes.
Okay? You're seeing some hairdressers, I'm sorry, they're going out of business.
Yes.
Because you no longer have many black women who are going after the Caucasian type of hair and style and so on. So I think there's a greater awareness. But I always say too that for you to be able to embrace your blackness, you must be very confident. Because we were taught to follow the Caucasian pattern.
Correct, correct.
I remember when I left school.
Because we thought it was beautiful.
Well, when I left school, some of my friends went to work at some banks.
Yeah.
And they told me the policy of the bank was you could not have braids at the bank.
Right, right.
You must have your hair straightened.
That's right. Yeah.
So we're getting out of that. So I believe there is hope. People are seeing and they're embracing their blackness a little better. So we may be able to get out of it.
But Allison, in saying this, I must say to you too that in our politics, we need black women. We need St. Lucian women. And we need St. Lucian women of some stature. I make no bones about that. And I put a question to you like this. Would you think of going up for election ever into politics?
I always leave it open that I am ready to serve my country in whatever capacity. I've served at the highest level of of the executive or in the public service. And if I have to run for political office, I am ready. I'm open to running.
Well, when you do, please, I'd love to be your manager.
I'll remember that.
There is nothing more that I would love to do, because I know how I would go about it. Because we need women of substance in our politics.
I agree with you,
Because
Dennis.
52% of our voters are women.
Yeah, I agree with
And
you.
it is important.
But I also would add to what you're saying that I think we need to pay greater attention to the people who we elect.
Yes.
And some people tell me politics is dirty, and I said, if you elect dirty people, you will have dirty politics.
It's who you put
So I
there.
think we need to sanitize our system in order that the right people put themselves
And you
forward.
have to bring people with humility.
That's
People
right.
who are humble. People who care of the whole and not, part of the whole. Because the whole cake is important,
That's
not a piece of the little pieces of the cake. Let us all come together and work hard. And we call ourselves Christians.
That's right.
Let us now develop this country. And we must now concentrate on our youth.
Absolutely.
Our youth.
Yeah.
Excellent. Allison, there's so much I wanted to ask you, but like everything
The
else,
time is up.
time approaches.
Yeah.
But you must come back, and if you decide to go, you'll be the first. You must come back here and let us really discuss things, because there's so much to discuss.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you immensely, and people in the diaspora. I hope that you have now understood who Allison Jean is and why she has to fight, or had to fight so hard, because what she's done, she's been an example to us all. She didn't sit back. She went and confronted the biggest of the big, the Americans. Allison, thanks very much, and God bless you.
Yes, thanks, Dennis.
for coming.
I enjoyed our conversation, and I'm willing to come back anytime you invite
Good,
me.
good.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.